The rejected bride stood in the dust, her wedding dress torn and muddy, opening a leather satchel filled with more money than the carnival crowd had ever seen. She pointed at three enormous Comanche warriors with burlap sacks over their heads, chained like animals for display. "I want to buy them, all three." Professor Ezra Shaw's weathered face creased with confusion. His traveling show had drawn the usual mix of townspeople and drifters to the outskirts of Redemption Creek, Texas. They came to gawk at curiosities, to feel superior to the caged and broken. None came to purchase. "Ma'am, these are dangerous men." Minerva Johnson's dark eyes held steady. The torn lace of her sleeve caught the evening wind. Her hair, once pinned carefully for a wedding that would never be, now fell in loose strands around her shoulders. "Name your price." The crowd pressed closer. Whispers cut through the air like prairie grass in a storm. A woman of her color making such demands. A woman in a wedding dress buying warriors. The wrongness of it all sat heavy in the Texas heat. Shaw's fingers drummed against his vest. The money in her satchel could buy his entire operation twice over. His moral compass spun wildly, but his empty stomach pointed true north. 500 each. Done. The word struck like a gunshot. The crowd recoiled. Even the warriors beneath their sacks seemed to shift, sensing change in the air. Sheriff Morgan Blackwater pushed through the gathering. His badge caught the lamplight, but his eyes held darker intentions. He had been watching from the shadows, calculating, measuring threats to his carefully ordered world. "What exactly do you plan to do with these acquisitions?" Minerva counted bills with steady hands. Each note fell like judgment on Shaw's makeshift table. The professor's conscience wrestled with his greed while the crowd watched this impossible transaction unfold. "Take them home." Blackwater's jaw tightened. He had seen this woman earlier, fleeing from the church in tears and rage. Now she stood transformed, purpose carved into every line of her face. The warriors stood silent as statues. Their breathing was the only sign of life beneath the rough burlap. Each man towered over 6 feet, their frames speaking of strength that chains could hold but not break. Shaw's hands shook as he counted the money. $1,500. More than most men saw in 5 years. The transaction felt like damnation, but his empty coffers sang a different song. "Papers," Minerva said. Shaw scribbled crude contracts on carnival letterhead. The legal language was thin, but money made weak words strong. Each signature bound these men to her will, at least in the eyes of the law. The crowd murmured their disapproval. A woman of her station, purchasing men like livestock. The impropriety of it all pressed against their sensibilities like a physical weight. Minerva loaded the warriors into her wagon with surprising gentleness. Their chains remained, but her touch spoke of different intentions. She guided each man carefully, her movements precise and respectful. Shaw leaned close to Blackwater as the wagon pulled away. His voice dropped to a whisper that carried more menace than shouting. "She has no idea what she's unleashed. Those aren't just any Comanche. They're the last chiefs of the Thunder Valley tribe." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. Thunder Valley. The name carried weight in certain circles, spoke of silver deposits and sacred ground. His corrupt network had been hunting these particular warriors for months. The wagon wheels cut deep ruts in the dusty road. Minerva's spine remained straight, her hands steady on the reins. Behind her, the 3 warriors sat in darkness, their world reduced to burlap and uncertainty. The church bell tolled 7 times. 6 hours earlier, she had stood at an altar, believing in promises and new beginnings. Clayton Vale had looked her up and down like livestock at auction, finding her wanting. "I cannot marry a woman of such substantial proportions." This was clearly a mistake. The congregation had gasped. The preacher had stammered. Minerva had felt the weight of every stare, every whispered judgment. Her size had been deemed insufficient for love, her worth measured in pounds and found lacking. She had fled the church, her dreams dissolving like sugar in rain. The inheritance from her family's northern business ventures had been meant for a new life, a fresh start in Texas. Instead, It had purchased her 3 companions whose own dreams had been stolen. The wagon rolled toward her homestead as darkness crept across the prairie. Stars emerged like scattered silver coins, indifferent to the human drama below. The wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. Blackwater mounted his horse and followed at a distance. His mind worked through the implications. 3 missing chiefs, a woman with too much money and too little sense, the disruption of carefully laid plans. Shaw packed his carnival quickly. The money sat heavy in his pocket, but heavier still was the knowledge of what he had done. He had sold men like cattle, taken silver for souls. The weight of it pressed against his chest like a stone. The warriors remained silent throughout the journey. Their breathing was steady, controlled. Whatever thoughts moved behind their covered faces remained hidden. They had learned patience in their captivity, had mastered the art of waiting. Minerva's homestead appeared in the distance. The house she had prepared for married life now awaited a different kind of family. The windows glowed with lamplight, promising warmth and safety. She had imagined sharing this place with a husband, building something lasting and true. Instead, she would share it with 3 strangers whose stories remained unwritten. The irony was not lost on her. The wagon stopped before the front porch. Minerva set the brake and turned to face her purchases. 3 men reduced to property by law, elevated to something else entirely by her intentions. "We're home," she said softly. The words carried across the prairie, mixing with wind and starlight. Whatever came next would be written in the space between hope and fear, between justice and mercy. The lamp flame danced across the parlor walls as Minerva approached the first warrior. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the burlap sack. The coarse fabric had rubbed raw patches on his neck, evidence of long captivity. She pulled the sack away with the reverence of unveiling a gravestone. The man beneath was not the savage beast the carnival had promised. His face was weathered bronze, carved by wind and sun into something noble. High cheekbones framed dark eyes that held intelligence and barely contained fury. Gray touched his temples, speaking of wisdom earned through suffering. "Takoda," he said quietly, placing a hand on his chest. She moved to the second warrior. This one was younger, his muscles coiled with the tension of a trapped wolf. When the sack came away, alert eyes immediately scanned the room, cataloging exits and weapons. His gaze settled on her with calculating intensity. Iana. The third man was a giant even among giants. His massive frame filled the chair, but when the burlap fell away, his eyes were gentle as summer rain. A scar crossed his left cheek, but it only emphasized the kindness in his weathered face. Chaitin. 3 names, 3 men, 3 lives reduced to carnival property, and now sitting in her parlor like dinner guests who had forgotten how to speak. Minerva set water to boil on the stove. The kettle's whistle would break the silence soon enough, but for now they sat in the weight of unspoken questions. She had bought them. They were hers by law. But what did that mean when the law itself was broken? She brought clean rags and began tending to their wounds. Takoda's wrists bore the marks of iron shackles. Yana's shoulder showed the purple bruise of a rifle butt. Chaitin's gentle eyes followed her movements with the wariness of a man who had known kindness only as prelude to cruelty. "You don't have to fear me," she said softly, dabbing at a cut on Takoda's forehead. He remained silent, but his breathing deepened. The others watched her hands work, clean and careful, bringing healing instead of harm. Days passed in careful choreography. Minerva prepared meals while they sat chained in the parlor. She read aloud from newspapers, sharing news of the outside world. They listened with the stillness of men who had learned to hear everything and reveal nothing. The wounds began to heal. Color returned to faces that had been gray with despair, but still, they did not speak beyond their names. Minerva found herself talking to fill the silence, about her journey from the north, about the inheritance that had bought her freedom and their contracts, about the wedding that had crumbled like old paper in the rain. "He said I was too much woman for his liking," she said one evening, stirring the fire. "Too big, too proud, too something. as if I could make myself smaller to fit his narrow world. Takoda's eyes flickered. A muscle in his jaw tightened. Men like that fear what they cannot control, she continued. They want wives who will disappear when convenient, appear when needed, ghosts in their own homes. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows. Outside, the prairie stretched endless and indifferent. You understand something about being judged by appearance, she said, not looking at any of them directly. About being reduced to what others see instead of who you are. Takoda shifted in his chair. The chains clinked softly. I don't know what you did to deserve capture. Don't know what crimes they claim you committed. But I know what it feels like to be found wanting by people who never bothered to look. She set down her needlework and met Takoda's eyes directly. You were not rejected for your size. The words came clear and precise, each syllable weighted with truth. Takoda's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being heard. You were rejected for your strength. Weak men fear strong women. The room went still. Even the fire seemed to pause in its dancing. Minerva's breath caught. Perfect English, spoken with the cadence of education and the confidence of leadership. Her assumption crumbled like clay in a storm. You understand everything, she said, every word. Yana leaned forward. We have been listening, learning, planning. Chaitin's gentle voice rumbled like distant thunder. You have shown us kindness. We will not forget. The chains that bound them suddenly seemed insignificant. These were not broken men waiting for rescue. They were warriors gathering strength, measuring their captors, choosing their moment. How long have you understood? Since the carnival, Takoda said. We spoke no English for the crowds. Let them think us beasts. Beasts hear things men would not say in front of equals. Yana's eyes hardened. We learned much about the sheriff, about the men who hunt our people for sport and profit. About the silver, Chaitin added quietly. The word hung in the air like smoke. Silver. The metal that drove men to madness, that turned neighbors into enemies, that made human souls negotiable currency. Thunder Valley, Takoda said. Our ancestors rest there. The earth holds their bones and veins of silver. We are the last guardians of that sacred place. Minerva felt the weight of understanding settle on her shoulders. She had not simply bought 3 warriors. She had purchased the keepers of a treasure that would reshape the territory. The sheriff knows, she said. He knows, the carnival master knows. They have been hunting us for months, waiting for the right moment to take what we guard. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, an owl called across the darkness, its voice carrying warnings that only the wind could read. You could have escaped by now, Minerva said. These chains would not hold you if you truly wanted freedom. Where would we go? Takoda asked. Our people are scattered. Our land is claimed by others. We stay because you treated us as men, not animals. And because running would not solve the larger problem, Yana added. The silver will draw others. The sacred ground will be violated. Our ancestors' rest will be disturbed. Chaitin's massive hands clenched into fists. We must make our stand somewhere. Here is as good as anywhere. The lamp flame guttered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. 3 warriors and 1 woman, bound together by circumstance and choice, facing enemies who saw them as obstacles to wealth. What do we do? Minerva asked. We wait, Takoda said, and we prepare. They will come for us soon enough. Thunder rolled across the prairie, though no clouds darkened the star-filled sky. The sound seemed to rise from the earth itself, from the bones of the ancient dead calling to their guardians. The house settled into silence, but it was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the quiet of allies recognizing each other across the divide of race and circumstance, finding common ground in their shared refusal to be broken by a world that saw them as less than human. Outside, the wind carried whispers of coming storms. The morning sun crept through the kitchen window as Minerva taught Takoda the peculiarities of Texas property law. His weathered hands traced the words on yellowed documents, his finger following legal phrases that could mean freedom or continued bondage. The deed is in your name, he said, studying the papers. But a woman's ownership is fragile here. Men can challenge it. Yana cleaned his rifle with practiced efficiency, each motion speaking of years spent maintaining weapons for survival. The barrel gleamed like silver in the lamplight, a tool of necessity rather than violence. "The sheriff watches the house," he reported. "3 men rode the perimeter yesterday. They measure our defenses." Chayton sat by the window, his massive frame alert despite his gentle demeanor. His eyes tracked movement in the distance, cataloging threats with the patience of a natural guardian. "Clayton Vale comes this way," he said softly. "The man who rejected you, he brings papers." Minerva's hand stilled on the coffee pot. The dregs at the bottom swirled dark and bitter, carrying the weight of coming confrontation. Hoofbeats approached like distant thunder. Clayton's voice carried across the yard, commanding and entitled. Sheriff Blackwater rode beside him, his badge catching the morning light. "Miss Johnson," Clayton called from the porch, "we need to discuss your situation." Minerva opened the door but did not invite them in. The warriors remained visible behind her, their presence a silent statement of alliance. "My situation is perfectly clear, Mr. Vale." Clayton's eyes swept over the 3 warriors, calculating their threat. His face showed the disgust of a man confronting his own rejected property. "You cannot live alone with these savages. It's unseemly, dangerous. I live as I choose." Blackwater stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun belt. The gesture was casual but loaded with menace. "The territorial law is clear. An unmarried woman cannot hold property without male guardianship. Your purchase is invalid." The papers in his hand rustled like dead leaves. Legal words that could strip away everything she had built, everything she had chosen. "I have money, I have ownership documents." "You have delusions," Clayton said. "Marry me quietly. I'll overlook your recent behavior. The savages can be returned to proper custody." The word proper hung in the air like poison. Proper meant chains and cages. Proper meant reducing men to livestock for the entertainment of crowds. Takoda's hand moved to the handle of his knife. The gesture was subtle, but Blackwater caught it. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Any resistance will be met with force," he said quietly. Minerva felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. Safety lay in submission, in accepting the narrow role they offered. But safety bought with surrender was another kind of prison. "I need time to consider." 24 hours, Blackwater said. "Then we return with federal authority." The horses wheeled away, carrying threats and ultimatums into the prairie distance. Dust settled slowly, coating everything with the residue of confrontation. Inside, the warriors moved with new purpose. Yana checked the windows, measuring fields of fire. Chayton tested the strength of door frames and shutters. Takoda spread a map on the kitchen table, marking escape routes and defensive positions. "They will not wait 24 hours, Takoda said. "Tonight, they will come quietly. Make it look like an accident." Minerva poured coffee with hands that barely trembled. The cup warmed her palms, a small comfort against the chill of coming violence. "We could run," she said. "Where?" Yana asked. "The silver draws them. They will follow until they have what they want." "Or until they are stopped," Chayton added quietly. The house creaked in the wind. Outside, clouds gathered on the horizon, promising storms that would wash the prairie clean or drown everything in their path. "I never wanted this," Minerva said. "I wanted peace, a quiet life." "Peace is earned," Takoda said, "not given." The afternoon stretched long and tense. Neighbors rode past, their faces carefully neutral. Word had spread through the territory. The woman who bought warriors. The men who challenged law and custom. Mrs. Henderson from the next homestead stopped her wagon at the gate. Her weathered face showed the strain of a woman caught between conscience and survival. "They're saying terrible things in town," she called. "About you and them men." "What kind of things?" "That you're planning an uprising, that you're working with hostiles to drive out decent folk." The lies spread like prairie fire, consuming truth in their hunger for fuel. By evening, Minerva had become a threat to civilization itself. "You should leave," Mrs. Henderson said, "before this gets worse." The wagon rolled away, leaving them isolated in the gathering dusk. Even those who might have shown sympathy now kept their distance, unwilling to risk association with the condemned. Takoda emerged from the cellar carrying an ancient war club. The weapon was carved from oak and bound with leather, its surface polished smooth by generations of warriors' hands. "My grandfather's," he said. "It has tasted the blood of men who thought they could take what was not theirs." Yana loaded his rifle with ceremony, each bullet a prayer for accuracy. His movements spoke of rituals learned in childhood, of preparations made by generations of men who had faced impossible odds. Chaitin sharpened his knife on a whetstone, the blade singing softly with each stroke. His gentle nature had not left him, but it was now wrapped in the steel of necessity. "We make our stand here," Takoda said, "together." The word carried weight beyond its simple meaning. Together meant more than alliance. It meant chosen family, bound by respect rather than blood. Night fell like a curtain across the prairie. Stars emerged, cold and distant, indifferent to the human drama below. The wind carried the scent of coming rain and the distant sound of riders. Minerva extinguished the lamps, plunging the house into darkness. They would come thinking to find sleeping victims. Instead, they would find warriors ready for battle. The floorboards creaked as the four allies took their positions. Takoda by the front window, war club in hand. Xiana at the back door, rifle ready. Chaitin at the kitchen window, knife gleaming in the starlight. Minerva crouched by the side window, her father's pistol heavy in her hands. She had never killed a man, but tonight might demand that she learn. The prairie held its breath. Somewhere in the darkness, enemies gathered like wolves, circling their prey. But inside the house, the prey had become predators. Thunder rumbled in the distance, though no lightning split the sky. The sound seemed to rise from the earth itself, from the bones of ancient warriors calling to their descendants. The waiting began. The knock came at dawn, soft and hesitant. Professor Shaw stood on the porch, his carnival clothes replaced by a simple traveling coat. His eyes darted nervously toward the horizon where dust clouds spoke of approaching riders. "I need to speak with you," he said. "All of you." Minerva opened the door but kept her hand near her pistol. Trust had become a luxury she could no longer afford. The warriors emerged from their positions, weapons within easy reach. Takoda's war club rested against his shoulder. Yana's rifle remained loaded and ready. Chaitin's knife gleamed at his belt. Shaw's hands trembled as he removed his hat. The man who had sold human beings now stood before his victims, seeking something that might have been redemption. "I am not who you think I am." The words fell into the morning silence like stones into still water. Each ripple carried implications that stretched beyond the simple statement. "I work for the federal government, Marshal Service. I have been tracking Blackwater's operation for 6 months. Takoda's grip tightened on his war club. Another white man with another story, another excuse for the inexcusable. "You sold us," Yana said quietly, "like cattle." "I needed evidence, witnesses. The sale was legal, documented, public. It proves human trafficking." Shaw pulled papers from his coat. Federal badges and warrants, official seals that carried the weight of distant authority. "The marshals are coming, but they are still 3 days away." Minerva studied the documents, her education allowing her to parse the legal language. The papers appeared genuine, but paper could lie as easily as men. "Why should we believe you?" "Because Blackwater knows his operation is compromised. He will move against you tonight, not tomorrow. He cannot afford to let you live." The professor's words carried the weight of certainty. Whatever game he had been playing, the stakes had risen beyond his ability to control. Chaitin moved to the window, his massive frame blocking the light. His gentle eyes had hardened into something that spoke of violence held in check. "Men watch the house," he reported. "More than yesterday," Shaw nodded grimly. "Blackwater has deputized half the town. He claims you are planning an uprising." The lie had taken root in fertile soil. Fear grew faster than truth, spread wider than justice. By nightfall, they would face not just corrupt lawmen but frightened citizens convinced they were protecting their families. "What do you propose?" Takoda asked. "We run." Find the marshals before they reach town. Let federal authority handle this." "And the silver?" Yana asked quietly. Shaw's face went pale. The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "What silver?" "Thunder Valley," Takoda said. "The sacred ground. The reason you and Blackwater hunted us." The professor's composure cracked. His carefully constructed story began to crumble under the weight of deeper truths. "I don't know anything about silver." "You know everything," Chayton said softly. "You knew what we guarded, what we protected." Shaw's shoulders sagged. The burden of his deception finally proved too heavy to carry. "The government sent me to investigate trafficking, but I discovered the silver deposits by accident. Blackwater was already planning to eliminate you and claim the land." "And you said nothing," Minerva said. "I am one man against a corrupt network. I needed proof, evidence that would stand in federal court." "You needed us to be martyrs," Takoda said. "Dead witnesses who could not contradict your story." The accusation struck home. Shaw's face flushed with shame and desperate justification. "I never wanted anyone to die. I thought I could control the situation." "White men always think they can control what they do not understand," Yana said. Shaw flinched at the quiet venom in his voice. The weight of his choices pressed down on him like stones. "The marshals will arrive too late," he said. "Tonight Blackwater moves. He has 20 men, maybe more. You cannot stand against those odds." "We can try," Chayton said. "You will die, all of you." "Then we die free," Takoda said. The finality in his voice cut through Shaw's desperate reasoning. These men had found something worth dying for, something the professor had never understood. "There is another way," Shaw said. "Thunder Valley itself. The sacred ground. You know the terrain. You could make a stand there." "On the bones of our ancestors," Takoda said. "With the high ground, natural defenses, force them to come to you." The strategic sense was undeniable. Thunder Valley offered advantages that the homestead could not provide, but it also meant leading enemies to the very place they sought to protect. "It is a gamble," Yana said. "Everything is a gamble now," Minerva said quietly. She had been listening to the exchange, weighing options that all led to violence. The woman who had wanted only peace now faced the necessity of war. "If we go to Thunder Valley, we make our last stand on sacred ground," she said. "If we stay here, we die protecting nothing." "The silver will draw others," Shaw said. "Even if you survive tonight, more will come. The only way to end this is to expose the corruption, let federal authority restore order." "Federal authority put us in chains," Takoda said. "And federal authority can break them," Shaw replied, "if we survive long enough." The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of doubt. Whatever choice they made would be final. No second chances, no opportunity to reconsider. Minerva moved to the window and stared out at the prairie. Somewhere beyond the horizon lay Thunder Valley, where ancient bones held vigil over veins of silver. The sacred and the profane intertwined in the earth itself. "We go to Thunder Valley," she said. "Together." Shaw nodded, relief and fear warring in his expression. He had set these events in motion, and now he would see them through to their conclusion. "Pack light," Takoda said. "Travel fast." "What about the house?" Minerva asked. "Houses can be rebuilt," Chayton said. "Lives cannot." They moved with the efficiency of people who had learned to carry their world on their backs. Weapons, water, a few precious items that spoke of home and memory. Shaw hitched his horse to their wagon. His hands shook as he worked, the weight of approaching violence pressing down on him like a physical burden. "The marshals will find us there," he said, as much to himself as to the others. "If we survive," Yana said. "We will survive," Takoda said. "The ancestors will guide us." Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky remained clear. The sound seemed to rise from the earth itself, from the sacred ground that called its guardians home. The wagon rolled away from the homestead, carrying 4 unlikely allies toward a destiny written in silver and blood. Behind them, smoke rose from the town where men gathered weapons, and hatred in equal measure. The final confrontation waited in Thunder Valley, where the bones of the ancient dead would witness the struggle of the living. Thunder Valley rose from the prairie like a scar in the earth, its rocky walls carved by centuries of wind and water. Ancient burial mounds dotted the valley floor, marked by weathered stones that had witnessed the rise and fall of nations. Takoda knelt beside the largest mound, his weathered hands pressed against the earth. The silver veins ran deep here, threading through the sacred ground like the arteries of sleeping gods. "My great-grandfather rests here," he said quietly, "and his father before him. The earth holds their bones and their wisdom." Yana positioned himself behind a natural rock formation, his rifle trained on the valley entrance. The high ground offered clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. If they were to make their stand, this was the place. Chayton moved stones with quiet reverence, building defensive positions that would not disturb the ancient dead. His massive hands worked with surprising gentleness, honoring the sacred while preparing for war. Minerva stood at the valley's edge, watching dust clouds approach in the distance. Blackwater's posse rode hard, their numbers swollen by townspeople convinced they were hunting dangerous criminals. 23 men, Shaw reported, collapsing his spyglass. Maybe more. The professor had shed his carnival persona completely. The man who emerged was harder, more focused, carrying the weight of federal authority and personal guilt in equal measure. The marshals, still a day away. Maybe more. The mathematics of survival were simple and brutal. 4 defenders against overwhelming odds, with nowhere to run and no help coming. "We could surrender," Shaw said. "Try to reason with them." "Reason died when they put us in chains," Takoda replied. The wind carried the scent of approaching storm clouds. Lightning flickered on the horizon, promising rain that would wash the valley clean or turn the earth to mud and blood. Clayton Vale rode at the head of the posse, his face twisted with righteous anger. The man who had rejected Minerva now pursued her with the fury of someone whose pride had been wounded beyond repair. "You brought this on yourself," he called across the valley. "Come down peacefully and we'll make this quick." Minerva's hand tightened on her father's pistol. The weapon felt heavy with the weight of choices that could not be undone. "I have nothing to say to you, Clayton." "You have everything to say," Blackwater shouted. "About your conspiracies, about your plans to arm the hostiles." The lies had taken root and flourished. In the minds of the posse, they faced not a woman and 3 men seeking freedom, but enemies of civilization itself. "You want the silver," Takoda called back. "Admit it. Tell them what this is really about." Blackwater's face flushed with anger. The truth was a weapon he could not afford to let his followers hear. "This is about law and order, about protecting decent people from savages and their sympathizers." "This is about greed," Yana said, his voice carrying across the valley. "About taking what belongs to the dead." The posse shifted uneasily. Some had come for justice, others for the promise of silver. The contradiction between their stated mission and their true purpose created cracks in their unity. "The woman is a criminal," Clayton announced. "She purchased stolen property, aided known hostiles. She must face justice." "Your justice," Minerva replied. "The kind that judges worth by the color of skin and the size of a bank account." "The kind that maintains order," Blackwater said. "The kind that keeps civilization from falling into chaos." Thunder rolled overhead, no longer distant. The storm was approaching, bringing with it the promise of cleansing rain and the possibility of divine intervention. Shaw moved to a position behind the burial mounds, his federal badge catching the lightning's reflection. The authority it represented seemed thin and fragile compared to the weapons surrounding them. "I am a federal marshal," he called. "This is illegal action against legal citizens. Disperse immediately." "You're a carnival fraud," Blackwater replied. "Your word means nothing here. My warrant says otherwise." Shaw held up the federal papers, but paper was no match for lead. The posse remained in position, their guns trained on the valley's defenders. "Last chance," Clayton said. "Send down the woman and the hostiles. Walk away from this." "And let you desecrate sacred ground?" Takoda asked. "Let you turn burial mounds into mining claims?" The accusation struck home. Several posse members exchanged glances, uncomfortable with the implications of their mission. "What sacred ground?" one of them called. "What mining claims?" Blackwater's face went pale. The questions he had hoped to avoid were being asked by his own men. "Don't listen to them," he said quickly. "They're trying to confuse you, make you doubt what's right." "Tell them about the silver," Chayton said, his gentle voice carrying surprising authority. "Tell them about the federal surveys, the mining rights you've already sold to Eastern companies." The truth spread through the posse like wildfire. Men who had come seeking justice realized they had been recruited for a treasure hunt that would desecrate the dead. "Is it true?" asked Tom Morrison, a farmer whose land bordered the valley. "Are there silver deposits here?" "That's not important," Blackwater said. "What matters is law and order." "What matters is honesty," Morrison replied. "Something we're not getting from you." The posse began to fracture. Some men lowered their weapons, unwilling to participate in grave robbing. Others pressed forward, driven by greed and the promise of easy wealth. "You're either with us or against us," Clayton declared. "Choose sides." The ultimatum split the group cleanly. Half the men rode away, their consciences unable to bear the weight of what they had been asked to do. The remainder hardened their resolve, committed to seeing the mission through to its bloody conclusion. 11 men, Shaw reported. "Better odds." "Still bad odds," Yana replied, checking his ammunition. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the valley in harsh white light. In that moment of clarity, each defender saw their fate written in the ancient stones and the modern guns arrayed against them. "Whatever happens," Takoda said, "we stand together." "Together," Minerva agreed. The word carried weight beyond its simple meaning. Together meant chosen family, bonds forged in fire and tested by adversity. It meant refusing to surrender dignity even in the face of death. "Together," Chayton and Ayana said in unison. Shaw nodded, his federal authority finally aligned with his personal conscience. The professor who had sold men for silver now prepared to die defending their freedom. Rain began to fall, turning the valley floor to mud and making the footing treacherous. The ancient burial mounds stood like sentinels in the storm, their weathered stones bearing witness to another chapter in the long struggle between justice and greed. Blackwater raised his rifle, his face twisted with rage and desperation. The man who had built his fortune on human suffering now faced the reckoning he had long avoided. "For law and order," he shouted. "For dignity," Takoda replied. The valley held its breath, waiting for the storm to break in earnest. In the distance, thunder rolled across the prairie, carrying with it the promise of justice deferred but not denied. The final confrontation was about to begin. The first shot cracked across Thunder Valley like divine judgment. Blackwater's rifle spoke, but the bullet struck ancient stone instead of flesh. The sacred mound seemed to deflect the violence, protecting their guardians with walls of weathered granite. Yana's return shot was precise and measured. Blackwater's hat flew from his head, the bullet close enough to part his hair. A warning, not a killing blow. "Surrender now," Shaw called, his federal badge gleaming in the lightning. "You are outmatched." The remaining posse members looked to their leader, uncertainty replacing their earlier bloodlust. The moral authority of federal law carried weight even in the wilderness. Clayton raised his rifle with shaking hands. The man who had rejected Minerva at the altar now sought to silence her forever. "You brought this on yourself," he shouted. "All of this." "I brought dignity," Minerva replied, "something you never understood." The confrontation hung in the balance, 11 desperate men facing 4 determined defenders. Rain fell harder, turning the valley floor into a muddy battlefield where ancient bones bore witness to modern hatred. Hoofbeats thundered from the valley entrance. Federal Marshal Cassidy rode hard, his blue uniform dark with rain and urgency. Behind him came 3 deputy marshals, their badges catching the storm's lightning. "Federal marshals," Cassidy called, "lower your weapons." Shaw's relief was visible from across the valley. The cavalry had arrived, bringing with it the promise of justice under law rather than the law of the gun. "About time," he muttered. Blackwater's face went pale. The corrupt sheriff who had built his fortune on human trafficking now faced the reckoning he had long avoided. "These men are criminals," he called desperately. "They've taken hostages." "We have warrants," Cassidy replied, dismounting with practiced authority. "For you, Sheriff, and for Clayton Vale, human trafficking, conspiracy, violation of federal treaties." The words struck the remaining posse members like physical blows. They had come seeking justice and found themselves accomplices to corruption. "Drop your weapons," Cassidy ordered. "This ends now." One by one, the posse members lowered their rifles. The fight went out of them as they realized the true nature of their mission. Clayton backed toward the valley wall, his rifle still trained on Minerva. Desperation made him dangerous, a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. "She's mine," he said wildly. "I was promised. The contract was signed." "No contract makes a person property," Cassidy said quietly. "Not anymore." The marshal's words carried the weight of a changing world, where old certainties crumbled before new understanding. "The silver," Blackwater said, making his final play. "They're hiding silver deposits. Federal property." "The silver belongs to the Comanche," Cassidy replied. "Under treaty law, these men are the legal guardians." Takoda stepped forward, his war club lowered but not abandoned. The revelation of legal ownership changed everything. "Our land," he said quietly, "our ancestors' bones, our silver." The federal recognition was more than victory. It was vindication, proof that justice could prevail even in the most unlikely circumstances. Shaw emerged from behind the burial mounds, his federal badge finally carrying the authority it represented. The professor who had sold men for evidence now stood witness to their liberation. 6 months of investigation," he said. "Documented sales, recorded transactions, sworn testimony. Enough to put you away for life." Blackwater's shoulders sagged under the weight of his crimes. The corrupt sheriff who had thought himself untouchable now faced the justice he had long denied others. Clayton made his final desperate move, swinging his rifle toward Minerva. The man who had rejected her for her size now sought to reduce her to nothing. Chayton moved with surprising speed for such a large man. His massive hand closed around the rifle barrel, bending it skyward. The shot went wild, echoing off the valley walls. "Enough," the gentle giant said. The word carried finality. No more violence, no more hatred, no more reducing human beings to objects of desire or disgust. Marshal Cassidy placed handcuffs on Blackwater with professional efficiency. The corrupt sheriff who had terrorized the territory now faced federal justice. "You have the right to remain silent," Cassidy said, "though I doubt you'll use it." Clayton was next, his dreams of silver and dominance crumbling like dust in the rain. The man who had rejected Minerva now faced rejection by society itself. The storm passed as quickly as it had come. Sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the valley in golden light. The ancient burial mound stood unchanged, their weathered stones bearing witness to another victory of justice over greed. 6 months later, Thunder Valley bustled with activity. The trading post Minerva had established served travelers of all backgrounds, a beacon of tolerance in an often intolerant world. Takoda managed the legal affairs, his education and wisdom making him a natural diplomat. The silver deposits provided steady income, but more importantly, they remained under Comanche control. Gianna served as head of security, his tactical skills protecting the trading post from those who would repeat Blackwater's mistakes. His rifle remained loaded, but violence was rarely necessary. Chayton worked the forge, his massive hands crafting tools and horseshoes for grateful customers. Children gathered to watch him work, drawn by his gentle nature and patient explanations. Minerva ran the trading post with quiet efficiency. Her business acumen, freed from the constraints of prejudice, flourished in the open air of Thunder Valley. A new suitor approached one evening, his hat in his hands and hope in his eyes. He was respectful, educated, and clearly impressed by what she had built. "Miss Johnson," he said, I wonder if you might consider my proposal. Takoda, Hyana, and Chaitin watched from nearby, their presence a protective wall around the woman who had given them freedom. I'm not looking for someone to complete me, Minerva replied. I'm already whole. The suitor nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. This was not rejection but education, a lesson in the difference between want and need. I understand, he said, but if you ever change your mind, I'll be in town. He rode away with dignity and tact, having learned something valuable about the nature of true partnership. The four friends gathered on the trading post porch as the sun set over Thunder Valley. The silver veins in the earth caught the light, but the real treasure was the bonds they had forged in fire and tested in adversity. Strange how it worked out, Shaw said, joining them for his weekly visit. The federal marshal had become a friend, his guilt transformed into genuine respect. Not strange, Takoda replied. Inevitable. Justice delayed is not justice denied. The ancient burial mound stood silent in the gathering dusk, their weathered stones bearing witness to a new chapter in the long struggle between dignity and degradation. The dead rested peacefully, knowing their guardians had prevailed. Thunder Valley had become more than a trading post. It was a symbol of what was possible when people chose to see past surface differences to the humanity beneath. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.